Well, story, I think 8. Let's just call it story number 9. Okay. This is more about why I'm here, why my kids are here, my grandkids, my great grandkids. So I'm sitting here July 3rd, and the weather's moving in, so I won't be able to go see my son and family, Rick. So I was watching the Pacific in Color on the Smithsonian Channel. Okay. See that island of Tinian? So this is on the Smithsonian Channel, season 1, episode 5, called Striking Distance. That island of Tinian is where my dad was. You kids, my kids, that's where your Grandpa Bill was. He was a Seabee, and he was on Guam and Tinian during the war, June 44, I think, after June 44, which is when the invasion of Tinian and Guam happened. So if you want to see what Grandpa went through to get home to get married to Grandma so they could have Bill, myself, and Dan, and so I could have you guys, well, there you go. So listen, I got to tell you this story. Let me mute this. Let me tell you this story because I remember Dad telling me this. He was also on 8 Attu, which is a island up in Alaska. And so when they tell you that this country was never invaded, they're lying because the Japanese did come over to those islands up in Alaska. Thankfully, they were repelled, of course. But I remember Dad talking about jumping off the battleship and not battleship. What was he on? He was on a destroyer. I've never been able to find out which one. But they used to jump off into the ocean to cool off and then climb back up the ladders. And, you know, as a kid, you want to believe your dad, but are you kidding? Grandpa used to live down on Ferry Street and Potomac, 218 and a half. It's the only house that sits between two houses and sits back on Potomac. He even used to tell me a story about when they used to swim across the Niagara River to the Canadian side. Now, I got to tell you, I didn't believe that one for a moment. But years and years and years later, in the 80s or 90s, I had come home. I stopped by to see my best friend's Dale Priester, his dad. He used to live over on Darwin. And every time we'd come home, we would, stop and say Mr. Priester and maybe go out to breakfast or whatever. I remember that subject came up. I don't remember how, but he used to do the same thing. So my dad wasn't lying. Dad never lied. Dad never swore. Hell or damn was it. So anyway, back to the story. So Dad was a machine. I don't remember the exact title. Machinist mate. He was a mechanic in the Seabees. So he worked on Jeeps and he worked on plane engines and he worked on tanks. I'm sure tanks. I know. I remember him saying that he worked in a motor pool. That was for sure because I have 2 pictures that Dad took on Tinian. One was a picture of the Enola Gay, the one that dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima. They never knew the plane was they knew the plane was on the island when it landed. They didn't know the bomb was there until when the plane came back. He got a picture of the plane on the tarmac after it got back. And then he convinced somebody to take him up into in a P-47 fighter. Took a picture of the island. Incredibly how small that island really was. I encourage you kids to locate this Smithsonian Channel, Pacific in Color. Like I said, it's episode 1, season 1, episode 5. See what your grandfather went through. I'm sure he came in after all this took place. The Marines are usually the first ones in. Once they secure the island, then everybody else comes in. They rebuild the runways. And of course, that's when my dad was there. So I encourage you to see this program. And if you haven't been to Washington, D.C., you guys need to go. At least take the kids. This is the day before Independence Day, 2024. You need to know what the history is, and you need to know about family that did their duty to secure and keep us free. On Grandma's side, the Joneses, I know for a fact that all of her brothers went to war. Uncle Butch Jones, which his real name is Elmer. Uncle Whitey, which I can't remember his, they all had nicknames. Uncle Eddie was Eddie. Uncle Harold, and I think one other. So I have a file of the Turlington heritage, and then Linda Benson down in North Carolina, she has all the information on the Joneses, traced them all the way back to the 1700s. So there you go. So the story goes, my dad's sitting around one morning, and I don't remember which morning. I just remember him. We talked about different things all the time. I only wish I had talked to Dad more about his wartime, what he went through. I do know Dad would not eat rice after he came back. He used to call it gook food. He said he had enough rice when he was in the service. And I can understand it because it's probably the only thing they did eat. But he said that he was on guard duty one night. They took him out to the edge of the rice paddies, put him in this little hut, and told him that if he heard anything, that he was to say, "Who goes there?" twice. And if they don't answer back, you don't ask a third time, you shoot. So, of course, Dad heard some kind of noise, asked once, "Who goes there?" asked twice, "Who goes there?" Still heard the noise, so he shot. Well, when they come back to get him in the morning, they went out to investigate to see what it was. Dad shot a cow. He shot some poor Tinian farmer's cow. So that's the story. He had a lot of them. So I encourage you, and this is why I'm making these videos. So you know something about your dad and what I've gone through and where I've been, because you kids don't have a clue any of my adventures. Some adventures you were on, some adventures you weren't. Some adventures you haven't an idea. You don't even. I mean, what's that song? I can't remember who sings it. I've been everywhere, man. Do 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 do. Yeah. Well, I've looked up all those places that's in that song. I've been to over 80% of those places that's in that song. I've been to every state except Hawaii, Maine, and I believe Vermont or New Hampshire. So there you go. Those 4 I haven't got to yet. I'm planning on seeing Vermont or New Hampshire soon. And I may just go over and cross the state line in Maine, go to a diner to say I've been there. Your daddy does that kind of thing. So there you go. Story number 9 about Grandpa and Tinian and how he shot a cow. Love you guys.